Good morning, good morning. So yesterday was pretty short by my standards. Less than 7 minutes or 8 minutes, six. It was somewhere in there. But it was just a short thing. Today is the day of salvation. Today is the day to make the decision. Felix said, I'll talk about Jesus at a convenient time, and that convenient time never came. So today we're in chapter 25, and we move from Felix to a guy by the name of Porcius Festus. So hello to everyone. Hey, Dean and Irma and everyone else who's just hopping on. It's good to see you guys. Let's learn the Bible together. So now when Festus had come to the province, after 3 days, he went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief men of the Jews informed him against Paul, and they petitioned him, asking a favor against him that he would summon him to Jerusalem while they lay an ambush along the road to kill him. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself was going there shortly. Therefore he said, let those who have authority among you go down with me to accuse this man, and see if there's any fault in him. And when he had remained among them more than 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, he commanded Paul to be brought. But when he had come, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around and laid many serious complaints against Paul, which they could not prove, while he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I offended in anything at all. But Festus, wanting to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem to be judged before me concerning these things? So Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to have been judged. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as you very well know. For if I am an offender or have committed anything deserving of death, I do not object to dying. But if there is nothing in these of which these men accuse me, no one can deliver me to them. I appeal to Caesar. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, you have appealed to Caesar? To Caesar you shall go. Now, this is pretty straightforward, but just explaining, for those who maybe didn't know. As a Roman citizen, we talked a little bit about the rights of Roman citizens a little while back, and Paul knew his rights. And one of those rights was you could make an appeal to go to the Supreme Court. But this was like a straight shot. There was no this court, then that court, then that court. You pretty much went straight up, and you got to eventually stand trial by Caesar himself. And it was a right given to Roman citizens. There's a fancy Latin term for it. But this is why Paul's going to go on a long journey, and it's going to take him years before he finally stands before Caesar. And what's really cool about this is that if you look at secular history, Nero is currently Caesar. And at this point, Nero's not a total nut job. Nero was an average Caesar, you might say. Probably even looking a little bit more sane than Caligula at this point. But as history would have it, after the time at which, we don't know the date, but the logical time frame, the window of when he would have seen Paul, it is after that point that he goes nutso and starts, riding around in his chariot naked with Christians burning on fire, hanging from the walls of Rome. This is, he was screaming, you are the light of the world. This is what actually happened, right? Him riding naked on a chariot, Christians hanging, covered in oil, burning alive, him screaming, you're the light of the world. He went a little nutso. And I think it's logical. It may be that when Paul stood before him and he rejected the message of Jesus, he let Paul go. Tradition, he let Paul go. And it wasn't until after Nero goes nutso that Nero then kills Peter, kills Paul, seeks these guys out. But Paul appeals to Caesar. But continuing, it says, and after some days, King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea to greet Festus. So here's now Herod Agrippa. And remember, before this, we had Herod Antipas. And this would actually be, Herod Agrippa II. We had Herod Antipas, then Herod Agrippa I, Herod Agrippa II. And he's with Bernice. Now, I have notes in my Bible. I don't memorize all of this stuff. Bernice was initially married to a Marcus Julius Alexander, who was a distinguished merchant. But then she married King Herod of Chalcis, who was her uncle. Then she married Herod Agrippa II. That's this Herod, her brother. But then she left him for Polemon II of Pontus, king of Cilicia. But then she came back to Herod Agrippa II, and that's where we're at right now. But after Agrippa II, she ends up marrying, because this is Herod Agrippa II is the Herod who will continue to reign on down until the sack of Jerusalem in 70 AD, at which point she marries Titus, the Roman next in line to the throne. His father is currently Caesar at that point, Vespasian, and so she marries his son Titus. But then when Titus becomes emperor of Rome, she's not respectable enough, so he leaves her. Anyway, she kind of worked her way up the food chain until she almost became empress of Rome. Just history. I don't know, do what you want. Verse 14, when they had been there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, there is a certain man left prisoner by Felix, about whom the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me. And when I was in Jerusalem asking for a judgment against them, to them I answered, it's not the custom of Romans to deliver any man to destruction before the accused meets the accusers face to face, and has the opportunity to answer himself concerning the charges against him. Therefore, when they had come together without any delay, the next day I sat on the judgment seat, commanded the man to be brought in. When the accusers stood up, but they brought no accusation against him of such things as I supposed, but had some questions against him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who had died, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. And because I was uncertain of such questions, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem to be judged concerning these matters. But when Paul appealed to be reserved for the decision of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept until I could send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I also would like to hear the man myself tomorrow. And he said, you shall hear him. So the next day, when Agrippa and Bernice had come to with great pomp and had entered the auditorium with the commanders of the prominent men of the city, Festus commanded Paul to be brought in. And Festus said, King Agrippa and all the men who are present with us, you see this man about whom the whole assembly of the Jews has petitioned me, both at Jerusalem and here, crying out that he is no longer fit to live. But when I found that he had committed nothing deserving of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I decided to send him. I have nothing certain to write to my Lord concerning him. Therefore I have brought him out before you, especially before you, King Agrippa, so that you may examine the examination has taken place, I may have something to write, for it seems me unreasonable to send a prisoner and not to specify charges against him. Yo, we just did a whole chapter. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. This is making up for all those days I got one verse done. So, he needs to have something to write to Caesar, because he'd look like an idiot just sending him to Caesar and saying, I don't know why I'm sending this guy. People want him dead, but not really exactly sure what's going on here. And that's kind of where Festus is at. Festus is new to the area. Felix had been around. Felix knew what was going on in the region, knew about Jesus, knew about the Christians. Festus is new. So he's kind of out of the loop, and so he's thinking Agrippa would be a good guy to ask and to know what's going on there. And so he calls in Agrippa. Agrippa says, I want to hear this guy too. This sounds fascinating. And he wants to write to my Lord. And you'll notice that's the word he uses for Caesar. Now, it says Augustus. Now, Caesar Augustus, he's dead a long time ago. But that's the idea, is the August one. When Caesar Augustus, when Octavian wanted to be renamed Augustus, the August one, it means deity. It means like God. I am the God-like one. And so by this point, worship of Caesars was a thing, right? They worshiped Caesars as God, or at least as a chief among their gods. And so he refers to him as Augustus because it's just a way you refer to Caesar, the godlike one. Nero, though, is specifically to Caesar here. And he calls Caesar his Lord. And that's something we see, is that this is the way they treat their leaders. And Man, today's a lot of history, and I told you guys the end of Acts moves a lot faster, and some of my favorite stuff is coming up in chapter 26. That is, I'll just put it this way: 2 trips to Israel ago, when I had the opportunity amongst the pastors to pick anywhere in Jerusalem, anywhere in Israel, right? I mean, of all the places we were visiting, we rotate teaching. Usually, all the pastors, we just kind of split up devotions. And when I was told, "Where would you like to teach?" I said, "I want Caesarea, and it's the only place I'm requesting that year." And it's because of what Paul's going to be saying in the next chapter. And I don't want to teach the future lesson too early. But if you get an opportunity, just pop out your phone, go on Google, and look up Caesarea and what you can see there. And today, you can see the auditorium. That is how they found Caesarea. We talked about that recently with the Aswan Dam lowering the sea levels, and they started seeing this horseshoe shape, and they've restored it. And you can go today and see this place, and it's the same place where Paul went. Some of the seats have all been refinished for people, but others are unrefinished. I mean, they're unfinished. They're the way they were originally, or they're way worn down, but nothing has been added to them. You can go and you can stand on the same floor where Paul would have stood as he makes his defense. And so that's where they're at. It's cool to stand there. It's cool to be there. There is something about the Holy Land that is just surreal, to stand in those places and to experience those things and to see what's going on around you and just imagine what it would have been like with this auditorium full of pomp. And Agrippa, there's a big platform where the royalty or where the dignitaries would sit. And so you see the platform. They were restoring the platform there my last trip. And so there's the platform and there's all this stuff, and it's cool. And so we're leading up to Paul's speech. This was a whole lot of just nuts and bolts getting us into the next text, but there's all of chapter 25 all in one day. And tomorrow's chapter 26, and I don't think we'll even get to my favorite part, but who knows? Paul's going to retell his testimony, so maybe we'll move quickly through that because we've already done it twice. It goes on 3 times in the book of Acts. And we're almost at the place where we have to start talking about what book do we do next? Back in the summer? When did we start Acts? We started Acts a long time ago. But back when we first started Acts, we had talked about doing Revelation. So I don't know. We'll have to see where we go next from here. But share this out. Whole chapter of the Bible. Boom. In under however much time it took me to do it. You guys have an amazing day. And Arla wants Revelation. Hey, comment. Let me know. What book would you like to study? I'll let you know the only requirement I've got is it's got to be a book I know. I know Revelation well enough because I don't usually use notes. And so I kind of got to have it up here, Otherwise, I'll just be rambling more than I already ramble. And I'm already rambling about how I ramble. So you can see how bad this could get really quickly. All right, guys. Have an amazing day. Chronicles. Thank you, Rick. I love you guys. And I just pray that God is blessing you and that the word of God is taking root in your hearts and it's flowing out through you. Have an amazing day, guys. I'm happy Sarah's agreeing with her mother for first time in her life. And it happened, guys, here on the RC Daily Bread. Take care.